I used to believe that love could make people better, that when my son married Olivia, all she needed was kindness, and I had plenty of that to give. I opened my home, my heart, and my fortune, believing we would live as a family bound by respect and affection. But looking back now, I see how naive I was. Love didn't make Olivia better, it only gave her a weapon to use against me. It all began on a crisp autumn evening. My son Ethan had just brought Olivia home for dinner, her laughter soft and melodic, her beauty effortless. She was polite, poised, exactly the kind of woman I'd imagined my son would fall for. I remember how she touched his arm lightly when she spoke, how his eyes softened in response. I saw the spark between them, and for a fleeting moment, I thought she might be good for him. After dinner, when Ethan went to take a call, Olivia and I sat together in the parlor. The firelight danced over the pearl buttons on her silk blouse. "You have such a beautiful home, Margaret," she said, looking around as if assessing every inch. "It feels like history lives here." I smiled, flattered but slightly uneasy at the way her eyes lingered on the portraits, the furniture, the silver frame holding my late husband's photo. "It does," I said softly. "My husband built most of this estate himself. He believed every corner of a home should tell a story." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "And one day, it'll all be Ethan's, right?" Something in her tone, light but probing, brushed against me like cold air. "Yes," I replied carefully. "In time, but right now it's still mine." She laughed it off, but that was the first time I felt the faint chill that would one day turn into a storm. As months passed, Olivia settled into our lives, charming, graceful, ever so helpful. She started assisting with the household, organizing dinners, even redecorating spaces that hadn't needed changing. Ethan adored her. When I tried to voice concern about her extravagance or her subtle control over him, he'd smile and say, "Mom, she's just making things more modern. You should be happy." I wanted to be happy. God knows I tried, but happiness is hard to sustain when your home starts feeling like someone else's kingdom. Slowly, Olivia began drawing Ethan away from me. Family dinners turned into private date nights. Weekend visits became rare. She told him I was overbearing, that I needed to let go. Soon, my son stopped calling me Mum, with the same warmth. The last time we all had dinner together before their wedding, Olivia sat across from me, twirling her engagement ring as if admiring her conquest. "Ethan and I are thinking of moving after the wedding," she said casually, looking at him instead of me. "Somewhere fresh, maybe sell this old place." "Too many memories." Ethan hesitated, glancing at me. "We haven't decided yet." "Oh, darling, you said yourself it's time to move on," she replied sweetly, pressing her hand to his. That was the first time I saw my son stay silent in my defense. On their wedding day, Olivia looked radiant, all lace and diamonds. But when she hugged me after the ceremony, her perfume made my throat tighten. She leaned close and whispered, "I'll take good care of him, and everything else." Everything else. Those words haunted me long after they left for their honeymoon. At first, I tried to keep the peace. I'd visit occasionally, bringing homemade food or small gifts. But Olivia would always have an excuse. "He's working. He's sleeping. He's not home." It became painfully clear that I was being phased out, bit by bit, from my own son's life. When I finally managed to see Ethan alone, he looked tired, distant. "Mom." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Please don't make things harder." "Olivia thinks you don't like her." "Ethan," I said, holding his hand, "I don't dislike her. But she's changing you. You've stopped coming around. You've stopped." "Stop." He cut me off sharply. "I'm just trying to build my own life. You have yours, I have mine." That night, I cried quietly in my room. My husband's portrait seemed to watch me from across the hall, his eyes filled with the same strength I'd once leaned on. But now I was alone, and Olivia had won the first round. The real betrayal, however, came 2 years later. Ethan fell ill, not severely, but enough for me to visit and help. Olivia allowed it, though I could sense her discomfort. She never liked me touching her space. One morning, I found an envelope on the kitchen counter addressed to Ethan, Olivia. It wasn't sealed, and I admit curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a document, a transfer of property deed with my son's name replacing mine. My estate. My home. My heart nearly stopped. When I confronted Ethan that night, he looked guilty. "Mom, it's temporary." Olivia said it's better for tax reasons just until. "Tax reasons," I snapped. "Do you even hear yourself? That house was your father's legacy. Mine to live until I die. Olivia walked in, calm as ever, holding a glass of wine. Oh, Margaret, please don't be dramatic. We're family, it's all in the same hands. I stared at her, that cold, calculated smile, her eyes gleaming with quiet victory. For the first time, I saw the truth clearly. She'd never wanted a family. She wanted power. I felt something harden inside me that night, the kind of resolve you don't announce. The kind you build quietly, layer by layer, until it becomes unbreakable. I smiled, forcing my voice steady. You're right, Olivia, we're family. And in that moment I began planning how to destroy hers. After that night I learned to wear a smile like armor. On the surface, I played the role of the gracious mother-in-law, calm and forgiving. I brought Olivia flowers, complimented her dresses, and offered help whenever she pretended to need it. Inside, though, every word she spoke etched itself into a ledger I kept in my mind. A quiet record of her cruelty. Revenge, I realized, isn't born in rage, it grows in silence. Over the next few months, I watched her tighten her grip on Ethan. He began dressing differently, speaking differently, even eating differently, as if he were being rewritten in her image. My son, who once adored my Sunday roasts, now said, Olivia doesn't like heavy food. My son, who used to call me every morning, now texted once a week. One afternoon I arrived unannounced with a casserole, the way I used to. Olivia opened the door in a silk robe, her hair tied back, a faint trace of irritation in her eyes. Oh, Margaret, she said, her voice dripping sweetness. You should have called. Ethan's not home. That's fine, I replied, stepping past her before she could stop me. I'll just leave this in the kitchen. As I crossed the hallway, my eyes caught something odd, a large portrait on the wall. It was new, beautifully painted, but the subject made my stomach twist. It was Olivia, alone, standing in front of my mansion. The very home that once defined my life, now a trophy in her background. You like it? She asked from behind me, watching my reaction. It's striking, I said. Her smile widened. It was a gift from Ethan. He said this house feels more like mine now. Sweet, isn't it? That was the moment I knew. She wanted me erased. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my late husband's old desk drawers, searching for the documents I hadn't looked at in years. I found the estate's original deed, the trust papers, the codicil he'd written before he died. My hands trembled as I read the fine print. The clause was still there. The primary owner retains residence rights for life. Olivia might have tricked Ethan into transferring the title, but she couldn't touch what my husband had protected. Still, that wasn't enough. I didn't want to live in the house she wanted. I wanted her to burn in the ruins of her own schemes. So I began my performance. I started by apologizing. Yes, apologizing. Olivia, I said one afternoon, inviting her to lunch, I think I've been too hard on you. I want to make things right. Her surprise was genuine. She wasn't used to disarmament. Really? She asked, cautious. Really? I said with a warm smile. We're family. I was wrong to interfere. From that day, she lowered her guard. She let me back into their lives. Slowly, but enough to give me access. I made sure to praise her ideas in front of Ethan, to admire her taste, to show gratitude when she feigned generosity. I let her believe she'd won. Meanwhile, I was quietly gathering what she'd hidden. Bank statements, investment transfers, business filings, all the little trails of money that flowed from my son's accounts into hers. I had a friend in accounting, discreet, loyal. Every document I collected told a clearer story. Olivia wasn't just manipulative, she was strategic. She had funneled Ethan's inheritance into shell companies, all in her name. The final piece came from her own arrogance. One evening, during a dinner at their house, she got tipsy on Chardonnay and started bragging. You know, Margaret, she said, swirling her glass, Ethan and I are thinking of investing in Europe. I might even sell that old mansion soon. I've always dreamed of Paris. I leaned forward, pretending interest. Paris sounds lovely, but the mansion, surely Ethan would want to keep it in the family. She laughed, sharp and careless. Oh, he'll agree to anything I want. He always does. Ethan chuckled weakly beside her, not even realizing he'd been reduced to an accessory. That night, after they went to bed, I slipped into the study under the pretense of forgetting my shawl. On the desk lay her laptop, open. I plugged in a small flash drive my accountant friend had given me. It copied everything: emails, contracts, account details. When I got home, I printed the files and spread them across my desk like puzzle pieces. The picture they formed was breathtaking. Olivia wasn't just planning to sell my home. She'd been preparing to liquidate every joint asset, the cars, the stocks, even Ethan's life insurance, and move abroad under a different business name. My son would be left with nothing, and that's when my revenge turned from survival into purpose. I spent weeks building my plan. I met lawyers quietly, transferring my remaining shares into a separate trust Ethan couldn't touch without my consent. I rewrote my will, designating a scholarship fund in my husband's name as the beneficiary, not my son, not Olivia. Then, with the help of my accountant friend, I anonymously reported Olivia's shell companies for financial fraud. But I didn't stop there. To make it perfect, I needed her to believe everything was still under her control. So I invited them to dinner at the mansion. One final, family evening, as I called it. Olivia was radiant, wearing a diamond necklace I recognized as mine. Ethan looked distracted, tired. I poured the wine myself, setting the table with my best china. To family, I toasted. To family, they echoed. We ate, we laughed, and I told stories about my husband, about his favorite room, the one he used as an office. After dinner, I said, "You should both see it again. I made some changes." They followed me upstairs, unaware of what waited. When I opened the door, the walls were lined with photographs. My husband, Ethan as a boy, and one of me holding a newborn. The history Olivia had tried to erase stood shining in front of her. She forced a smile, very nostalgic. "It is," I said softly. "It's where everything began. And soon, Olivia, it's where everything ends." Her brows furrowed. But before she could speak, my phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer flashed across the screen. "Report filed. Assets frozen." I looked up at her and smiled. She didn't know it yet, but her empire had just crumbled. The phone started ringing the second the papers were signed. Not mine. Theirs. I watched Olivia's world implode like a glass sculpture struck by a careless hand, and for the first time in months I felt something close to pity flare and die in the same breath. I had planned carefully, quietly, the trust transfers, the anonymous report to the financial regulator, the lawyer's motion to freeze suspicious accounts. I had not wanted spectacle, I wanted protection, but people who build their lives on theft never stop at one theft. They brag, they boast, they leave footprints. Olivia had left a trail of careless vanity that led straight to her doorstep. It began with a call from Gregory early that morning. "They're waking up to this now," he said. "Bank compliance flagged multiple transfers tied to shell companies. They've frozen assets linked to those entities pending investigation. The real estate agent is asking questions about the deposit. Olivia's papers are under review." His voice was calm, but I heard it. The small thrill of being right, and then I silenced it inside me. There was no joy in watching a life fall apart, only the cold comfort of justice. By noon, the first message hit my phone. "Ethan's account has a hold on outgoing transfers." A screenshot from Gregory followed bank notifications, red banners, contact tracings that matched the emails I'd copied from Olivia's laptop. I sipped my tea and watched the sky over the estate, letting the shock unfold in someone else's life while keeping my own hands steady. I called Ethan. He didn't pick up. He called back, voice raw. "Mum, Margaret, they froze everything. Olivia says it's a mistake. She says there's an explanation." His breath rattled through the line. "She won't stop calling the agent. They're at my office." "I don't know what to do." "Breathe," I said, as if I had not been holding my own air hostage for months. "Call Gregory. Don't sign anything. Don't let them move money. Tell Olivia to stop talking to the agent." He was panicked, but he listened. For a moment, he sounded like my son again, frightened, small, human. I held that sound like a fragile vase. That afternoon, Olivia's mask began to crack in public. She arranged a dinner with friends, a cultivated circle that loved rumor almost as much as luxury. Word spread accounts frozen pending fraud investigation. The deposit on the house was in legal limbo. The agent called the developer called the lender put the project on hold. Suddenly, the future estate she'd gossiped about at the dinner table was an unattainable mirage. She tried to spin. She posted a carefully crafted statement. "Unfortunate clerical issues. We remain confident everything will be resolved." But the people who attended her dinner could see the tremor in her smile. A picture of Olivia in her silk blouse, phone pressed to her ear, was captioned by one guest, "When luxury meets chaos." It was petty, but it traveled fast. The press arrived 2 days later. It began as a whisper on social feeds, then a local business column, then a journalist at the developer's office, asking blunt questions about due diligence. Someone had leaked the shell company names. Someone else traced them to a small corporation in a neighboring jurisdiction with ties that smelled of laundering. I watched the headlines bloom across my screen and felt an odd detachment, like watching a storm roll across a landscape that I no longer called home. Olivia grew frantic. Her calls came at all hours. Her voice, always smooth, always controlled, fractured into something I had never heard. "Margaret, you don't understand," she begged once, in the thin hours after midnight. "People will lose faith in me, my career, my reputation." Her words clipped like broken lace. "You have to help me. You have to please." I had never heard that pleading directed at me before. Power had always been in her hands, now she was bearing her weakness. For a blinking second, the old mother in me stirred, the woman who patched skinned knees and stayed up overnight with fevers. Then I remembered how she had laughed with Megan and Samantha over the plan to take my money. I remembered the toast that had sounded like an executioner's bell. "I can't help you, Olivia," I said simply. "You made your choices." Her dissent accelerated. Investors pulled out of projects. The deposit already held in escrow was effectively tied up until legalities were resolved, and months would cost them more than their original savings. She lashed out at Ethan in private, blaming him for not being decisive enough, demanding that he make calls, threaten the bank, bend the world back into the perfect shape she expected. He had nothing to give her now but apologies and frantic phone calls. Megan and Samantha, the women who'd once raised their glasses to my ruin, started to unravel too. Megan received a terse email from an old employer asking for clarification about the business she'd put under her name. Samantha's glossy social feed went quiet. Men who'd once admired them for their sheen began to ask blunt questions. The web of allies Olivia had counted on turned into a sieve. One night, I attended a charity ball, not to gloat, but because good appearances makes other doors open. There, among the chandeliers and polite laughter, Olivia arrived like a wounded swan. She smiled at everyone, but the room had shifted. Conversations that had once fawned were now cautious. A woman I'd known for years pulled me aside. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "Do you think she did it?" Her eyes flicked toward Olivia. "So shameful. People believe what they see," I answered. "Evidence speaks louder than rumors." The lawyer's work was meticulous. Evidence amassed: emails, bank transfers, beneficiaries that didn't match disclosed ownerships. Police interviews were scheduled. When investigators first asked to speak with Ethan, he broke down in the questioning room. He admitted things I had already suspected but preferred not to hear from his own lips. He apologized for being blind, for letting her become a mirror that reflected what she wanted him to be. It hurt to hear him confess. But it also freed him. The shame was out in the air now, not stuffed into some silent box that corroded everything. Olivia's bravado ran thin. She tried a public appeal for sympathy, painting herself as a victim of accounting fraud. But the evidence, now in the hands of authorities and published in local papers, read differently. Her shell corporations were intricate, threaded through a dozen small firms and accounts. The pattern was clear: siphon, launder, hide. People who once threw parties at her name began to distance themselves. There was a moment when I saw her on the steps of the courthouse, face ruddy from the cold wind and more from humiliation. A television camera caught her fingers trembling around a legal brief. She looked at me across the lawn and the world narrowed to the two of us for a breath. Predator and prey reversed. Her eyes, once so sharp, flamed with something like fury but also a raw, exposed pain. She mouthed something I couldn't quite read. Regret. Threat. I didn't know, and in truth I no longer cared to guess. The real victory was quiet and bureaucratic. The developer returned the deposit to escrow. The lender froze loans tied to suspicious activity. The shell companies were flagged for investigation. Olivia lost the halo she'd woven. Her social invitations dried up. The neighbors who had once admired her taste now whispered about court dates and audits. I remember standing on the terrace that evening, the sky a bruised violet, and feeling the oddest thing: not triumph, not vindictiveness, but an exhausted relief. Justice, imperfect and slow, had finally found its leverage. I didn't dance on ruins. I simply closed the door on those who had used me and walked away. A month later, when the first hearings began, Ethan called. His voice was steadier now, threaded with something like humility. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry. For everything." "I know," I said. Don't ask for more than you deserve. Rebuild honestly this time. Can you forgive me? He asked, the question small and vulnerable. I don't know yet, I replied, but I'll watch. Actions, not promises. As our conversation ended, I glanced at the ocean in the distance and felt the first real wind of autumn sweep the property. Some things the law can fix. Others only time and courage can mend. If you want to see how this ends, if you want the final chapters of what happened to Olivia, to Ethan, and to me, subscribe and hit the bell to follow the rest of my story. You won't want to miss how the last act plays out. The next few days were like watching a storm roll in, slowly, beautifully, and inevitably. I didn't have to do anything. My plan was already in motion. Olivia's downfall began with a single phone call. I was sitting in my garden that morning, sipping my tea, when I heard the faint echo of her voice shouting through the speakerphone. "What do you mean the accounts are frozen?" she screamed. I smiled into my cup. She must have called every banker, every lawyer she could reach. By evening, her carefully woven web of deceit had started to collapse. Her shell companies were flagged for investigation, her overseas accounts under review. Even Ethan's trust, which she thought she'd controlled, was locked pending inquiry. By the second day, the mansion was filled with tension so thick it could suffocate. Olivia paced the hallway in silk pajamas, her phone glued to her ear. "No, that's impossible. There must be a mistake," she kept saying. Ethan sat silently in the living room, his face pale. "Liv," he finally said. "What's going on?" She turned on him with venom. "Don't question me, Ethan. This is your mother's doing. I can feel it." I appeared in the doorway, calm and composed, my pearls gleaming in the afternoon light. "Oh, Olivia, dear," I said softly, "I can assure you, I have no control over the federal fraud department." Her eyes widened. But, I interrupted, setting my teacup down. I did hear something interesting. Apparently, transferring large sums into unregistered corporations is frowned upon. Ethan looked from her to me, confusion clouding his face. "What is she talking about?" Olivia's voice cracked. "She's lying. Ethan, you know me." I tilted my head, pity in my expression. "He does know you, Olivia. The question is, does he still trust you?" The silence that followed was exquisite. Ethan stood slowly, his jaw tightening. "Is it true?" he asked her. "Did you move the money?" She stammered, searching for words that wouldn't come. I was trying to protect our assets. Be hiding them from me. "From her," she shouted, pointing at me. "She's trying to destroy us." I smiled. "Oh no, dear. I'm merely showing the truth. Destruction was your art, not mine." That night, Ethan slept in the guest room. Olivia didn't sleep at all. I heard her pacing upstairs, muttering to herself, glass breaking somewhere in the distance. It's funny. When you take power from someone who's built their entire identity around it, they unravel faster than silk in fire. The following morning, I made breakfast. I set 3 plates, poured coffee, and waited. Ethan came down first, exhausted but polite. Olivia arrived 10 minutes later, looking disheveled, mascara smeared. "Good morning," I said cheerfully. "Coffee." She glared at me. "You think this is over?" I stirred my cup. "Oh, darling, it hasn't even begun." Within a week, Olivia's life became a slow-motion collapse. Investigators contacted Ethan directly. He learned about her offshore accounts, the false investment firms, the stolen funds. I watched his heartbreak shift into fury. One night I heard shouting, doors slamming, her voice cracking through tears. "You can't just leave me, Ethan! You need me!" His answer was quiet but final. "No, Olivia. I needed my mother. You made sure I forgot that." He packed a bag and left the next morning. I found Olivia sitting by the window in a silk robe, staring at the driveway where Ethan's car had vanished. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "Are you happy now?" I took a breath. "Not yet." She turned, her eyes red. "You destroyed everything. My marriage, my reputation." I cut her off gently. "No, Olivia. You destroyed yourself. I just handed you the mirror." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The sun filtered through the curtains, lighting her face like a painting, the perfect portrait of a woman undone. In the following days, I made sure the consequences followed naturally. Olivia's name hit the papers first. Local businesswoman under investigation for fraudulent transfers. Her friends stopped answering calls. The women she lunched with whispered behind her back. Invitations disappeared. By the second week, the mansion she once flaunted had become her cage. Every corner reminded her of her fall. She began drinking early, forgetting to eat, sometimes even forgetting who she was angry at. Then one evening, there was a knock on the door. 2 officers stood outside with polite firmness. Mrs. Montgomery. She blinked at them. Yes. You'll need to come with us for questioning regarding financial irregularities. She froze. Questioning. No, this must be a mistake. I stepped forward, a soft gasp escaping my lips. Oh dear, is something wrong? Her glare could have set fire to stone. You planned this, she hissed. I lowered my voice. No, Olivia. I prepared for it. They led her away. I watched from the porch, arms folded, as the car pulled out of the driveway and disappeared down the long road. The evening sky turned a shade of gold that reminded me of freedom. But I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Revenge is a dish best served with patience and presentation. Over the next month, Olivia's case unraveled in public view. She was never formally arrested, but her reputation was beyond repair. The bank seized her accounts. The investors she'd charmed turned on her. She sold her jewelry, her cars, even her designer dresses to pay legal fees. And through it all, I visited her. Yes, I did. Once a week, I'd bring flowers, sometimes pastries, and sit across from her as she tried to act indifferent. One afternoon, she looked up from her untouched tea and whispered, "Why are you doing this, Margaret? Haven't you had enough?" I smiled, gentle as ever. "Enough. You took my home, my son, my peace. You made me a ghost in my own life. No, Olivia, I haven't had enough." Her eyes glistened. "You're cruel." I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "No, darling. I'm precise." That night, when I drove back to my mansion, my true, rightful home, I stood in the grand hallway and took a deep breath. The air smelled different now. Lighter, purer. I poured myself a glass of wine, walked to the balcony, and looked out over the gardens. The moonlight shimmered on the marble fountain, the same one my husband had built years ago. For the first time in years, I felt his presence. Proud, steady, almost amused. "Don't worry," I whispered to the night. I took care of her. It's strange how silence can sound so loud when the world around you collapses. Olivia's mansion, my mansion, grew quieter with each passing day, as though the house itself had chosen sides. The laughter, the footsteps, the scent of her expensive perfumes, all of it faded into ghosts. But I didn't move out, not yet. Revenge, after all, isn't only about destroying someone. It's about letting them live long enough to watch the ruins. A month after the investigation, Olivia called me. Her voice trembled with something I hadn't heard before. Not rage, not arrogance. Fear. "Margaret, please. I need to talk." I hesitated just long enough to let her desperation settle in. "Of course," I said gently. "Come over. We'll have tea." She arrived looking like a shadow of herself, thin, pale, her once perfect hair tied back without care. Her diamond ring was gone, the designer heels replaced by worn flats. Even her voice carried the exhaustion of a woman who'd spent too many nights battling her own reflection. "I can't fix this," she said, sitting across from me at the dining table. They froze everything. "My lawyer says I might lose the house." I tilted my head, as though confused. "The house? Oh, Olivia, that house has never been yours." Her hands clenched around her cup. "You don't understand, Margaret. I have nothing left." I leaned forward, my tone still soft. "Then perhaps you're finally starting to understand me." She looked up, eyes glistening with tears. "You won, didn't you?" I smiled faintly. Winning implies there was ever a fair game. Though we sat in silence for a long time. The clock ticked steadily behind us, and outside the rain began to fall. For a brief second I almost felt pity, almost. But then I remembered every humiliation she had orchestrated, every whisper she'd used to turn my son against me, every stolen glance at my husband's portrait as if she were claiming his legacy. So no, pity had no place here. When she finally spoke again, her voice cracked. "Ethan won't return my calls. He filed for separation." "I know," I said quietly. "He came to see me yesterday. He's staying at the cottage on the coast. He's healing." The word stung her like acid. She bit her lip, looking away. "Healing from you," I added softly. That broke her. The tears came fast, uncontrolled, raw. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing into her palms. For a moment I just watched. Then I reached across the table, placing my hand lightly over hers. "Olivia," I whispered, "this isn't the end. It's the unveiling, you see. For years you hid behind charm and beauty and ambition. But now you have to see yourself. That's the hardest punishment of all." She didn't answer, just wept quietly, her shoulders shaking. When she finally left that night, she looked smaller, diminished, like the echo of a woman who had once believed herself invincible. But I wasn't finished. The next phase of my plan wasn't about money or power. It was about truth. For months, Olivia had controlled Ethan with lies. She'd told him I was manipulative, controlling, cold. I wanted him to see the reality she'd built for him, the documents, the forged emails, the stolen inheritance. So I invited him to dinner at the mansion. Alone, he arrived hesitant, carrying the weight of shame in his eyes. "Mother," he said quietly, "I don't know how to face you after everything." I smiled. "Then don't face the past. Face the truth." I handed him a folder, the same one I had built piece by piece over months of quiet work. Inside were bank statements, letters, copies of her company filings. He flipped through them slowly, his expression changing from confusion to disbelief to horror. "She used my name," I nodded. "She used everything. Your name, your trust, your love. But she never used your heart. That's the one thing she couldn't fake." He looked up at me then, tears gathering in his eyes. "You tried to warn me." "I did," I said, my voice steady. "But love blinds even the best of us. I only hoped you'd see before it was too late." He closed the folder and leaned back, exhaling deeply. "What happens to her now?" I sipped my wine. "That's up to her. Some lessons can't be taught, only lived." That night, Ethan stayed for dinner. We talked for hours, not as mother and son divided by bitterness, but as two souls finally breathing the same air again. He apologized for everything, the distance, the anger, the blindness. I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because forgiveness was part of my freedom. When he left, he hugged me for the first time in years. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "I know," I said softly. "I never stopped loving you." As his car disappeared down the driveway, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. But fate, as I've learned, always saves one final act for those who crave closure. 3 days later, I received a letter, no return address, no signature, just my name written in trembling ink. Inside was a single line: "I'm sorry. Tell Ethan I loved him in my own broken way." My heart sank. I called every number I could think of, the police, local hospitals, until one voice on the line confirmed what I already feared. They had found her car by the cliffs empty, her purse and shoes neatly left behind. The news didn't bring joy, it didn't even bring relief. Just an endless, aching silence. I drove to the coast that evening, standing where the sea met the sky, the wind howling against the rocks. Somewhere below, the waves swallowed her secrets. "I didn't want this," I whispered into the air. "I only wanted you to see." The ocean didn't answer, it never does. When I returned home, I poured 2 glasses of wine. One for me, one for the ghost of a woman I once hated and perhaps once pitied. "To truth," I said softly, raising my glass, "and the cost it demands." The chandeliers above me shimmered, catching the light like tears. The house, once divided by resentment, now stood silent, serene, finally mine again. The morning after I learned about Olivia's disappearance, I woke to a silence that felt different, not heavy, but hollow, the kind of quiet that follows the end of something long and exhausting. The newspapers were already whispering. Socialite's car found abandoned on coastal cliffs. Ongoing investigation. Her name was everywhere again. But this time not with admiration, not with envy, just pity. For the first time in years I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel triumphant. I simply felt tired. I walked through the house. The hallways that once echoed with arguments. The rooms she'd tried to claim. The walls that had witnessed everything. The portrait of Olivia in front of the mansion was gone, replaced by one of my husband and me, taken the year before he died. He looked so alive there, smiling at me like he still approved. I stood in front of that picture for a long time. "It's over," I whispered. "I kept our home. I kept our name, but it came at a price." That evening Ethan returned. He looked older, not in years but in spirit. Life had humbled him in ways I never could. When he walked into the living room, the same space where he'd once shouted at me to leave him alone, I saw the guilt in his eyes before he spoke. "Mom," he said softly. "They confirmed it. Olivia's gone." I nodded. "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to find words. "She left a note. They found it in the car." My heart tightened. "What did it say?" He swallowed. "Just one sentence. I couldn't live in a world where I lost everything I pretended to deserve." We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the faint crackle of the fire. After a moment, Ethan looked at me, tears brimming in his eyes. "I blamed you for everything, Mom. I thought you were cold, controlling, jealous, but she was the one pulling the strings. You were just trying to protect me." I reached out, touching his hand. "I wasn't perfect, Ethan. I let pride blind me too. But I never stopped loving you. Not even when you hated me." He nodded, his shoulders trembling. "I know that now." We talked late into the night. About his childhood, his father, the years we lost to Olivia's poison. Somewhere between the confessions and the silence, the distance between us dissolved. He fell asleep on the couch like he used to when he was little, and I covered him with a blanket, brushing his hair gently from his forehead. For the first time in years, my home finally felt like home again. In the weeks that followed, the investigation faded from the headlines. No body was ever found, only theories. Some said she ran away under a new identity. Others believed the sea took her. I stopped wondering which one was true. Some endings don't need certainty, they just need peace. Ethan stayed with me for a while. He helped restore the garden, fixing the fountain that had cracked over the years. He started painting again, something he hadn't done since college. There was something healing about watching him create, as if each brushstroke erased another scar Olivia had left behind. One afternoon, as I watched him from the terrace, he looked up and smiled. "You should join me, Mom. You used to paint, didn't you?" I laughed softly. "That was a lifetime ago." "Then start again. You deserve a new one." It was such a simple thing to say, but it stayed with me. That night, I took out an old canvas and began to paint. Not portraits, not landscapes, just light. Golden light spilling through a window, soft and endless. It felt like breathing again after being underwater for too long. A few months passed, and Ethan decided to move to the coast permanently. He wanted to open a small art studio to start fresh. I encouraged him, even though the thought of an empty house scared me. Before he left, he hugged me tightly and said, "You know, Mom, people say revenge ruins you. But I think it just showed you who you were always meant to be. Strong, unstoppable, and free." I smiled, holding back tears. Freedom doesn't come from revenge, darling. It comes from surviving it. When he drove away, I stood on the balcony again, watching the sunset drape the mansion in gold. For once, it wasn't a symbol of loss. It was a promise of calm. In the quiet days that followed, I found a rhythm again. Morning walks through the rose garden, tea in the sunroom, letters from Ethan filled with stories of new beginnings. The ghosts in the house grew softer, kinder, until they felt almost like company. And sometimes at night I'd pour 2 glasses of wine, one for me and one for Olivia. I'd set hers across the table, untouched, and whisper, "You could have had everything if you hadn't wanted it all." Because the truth is, revenge doesn't always taste sweet. Sometimes it's bitter, sharp, and lonely, but it cleanses. It burns away everything false until only the truth remains. I rebuilt my life on that truth. I turned my pain into art, my silence into peace. And though I'll never forget what she took from me, I finally understood what she gave me without meaning to. A reason to reclaim myself. As the years passed, the mansion stood tall again, its marble floors gleaming, the garden in full bloom. Visitors would sometimes ask about the woman in the portrait, the one beside my husband, smiling with quiet pride. And I would tell them, she was a woman who lost everything once, and then decided that was the best thing that ever happened to her. Because revenge, at its heart, isn't about destruction, it's about rediscovery. The moment you look into the mirror and finally recognize the person staring back. So here I am, Margaret Montgomery, survivor, mother, avenger, woman. And for the first time in my life, I don't need to fight for anything, because I've already won.